So, you may be wondering why I'm a crow. Anyways, this is a surprisingly large episode for this time of year, huh? I think after spending weeks recording and editing on my 2021 best list, I just really got the itch to actually write about music again. Though to be fair, there was also just a lot of quality coming out this month too. Anyways, that's enough stalling, let's get to it. This is Albumpressions. I'm gonna keep this brief because I've already done a full list video on these guys and y'all probably know what to expect, but yeah, a 20-minute EP from these progressive jazz rockers and a push back towards heavier tones this time around. A lot of this reminded me of the louder moments from Maps of Non-Existent Places, which, again, if you saw that top 12, you know how I feel about that album. We'll certainly need more listens to really digest this and figure out just how good it is, but any new thank you sign this material is something I'm almost obligated to give a big hell yeah to. I think I'm vibing really hard with these kinds of melodic prog metal releases lately. The new Between the Buried and Me has been growing on me a lot, and this is also hitting that sweet spot of atmosphere and intrigue quite well too. I was actually worried about this one being a dud given the unfortunate state the band's in, and it's certainly a bit lacking in the bass department compared to what I'd hoped for from this band, but nah, I'm liking it quite a bit, even if it's probably gonna take a few more listens to untangle and make sense of. I also do miss their slightly heavier side. It definitely feels like a bit too much of this might get mixed together in my mind. It's hurting for dynamics, but it's a pleasant and colorful listen in spite of that, so I can't complain too much. Definitely worth a listen though if you're a fan of prog or metal even a tiny bit. With Devin, you're never quite sure what you're gonna get, even if you have a general idea of it. If the man wants to release a double album with the first disc being some weird hybrid of his particular brand of metal with ambient and glitch music, god damn it, he's gonna do it. And that's basically what this is, though to me it comes off as like a natural extension of Empath. It's as intricate and immaculately produced as you'd expect from Devin. It's long and sprawling, it's all over the place sonically, and I'd struggle to call it cohesive. But whereas Empath was still at its core a metal album first and foremost, this is a decent bit quieter and significantly less rhythmic. Honestly, I was led to expect even weirder than what we got, but it's certainly not a traditional album for him, or really like any album I've ever heard before either. Funnily enough, the Cynic album I just talked about may be the closest comparison I can make here, and it's definitely one I'm looking forward to unraveling in the near future. This, on the other hand, there really isn't much to think about, and I don't really think it wants you to think about it either. You get what you see. Warm, ambient synths with touches of piano, guitar, and vocals. 100% about the atmosphere, and it's a very cozy and pleasant atmosphere to be sure, but it's clearly not meant to be something you ponder over the intricacies of, like with the puzzle. It's almost certainly going to be considered the lesser of the two discs by most people, and yeah, I do find this one pleasant, but I confess I wouldn't be covering it here if not for the fact that it's a sister album of the one I wanted to cover. I'll still take it for what it is, though. Not an act I've thought about in a while, but not one I'm displeased to see return either, cause this is pretty cool stuff. So Hideous have always had this particular black case style that incorporates a lot of symphonic elements, alongside really friggin' excellent drum work, to create intense, intricate, flowing albums, and this one's no exception. Even throwing in some nice surprises, like the weirdly fun The Emerald Pearl that even ends with a sax solo, and some of the more dissonant and progressive elements that come in across the epic of Motoric Visage. It certainly keeps itself busy across its admittedly rather brief runtime. Would have loved to hear a bit more, and while the drum mixing is a little off for me, it doesn't ruin the atmosphere they're going for either. Definitely one I'm going to be coming back to. When I heard Elder were teaming up for a collab album with fellow stoner rock group Kadavar, an act I am not at all familiar with, I certainly wasn't expecting to find what's more of a Steven Wilson / Pink Floyd type album than anything. Like, there's the expected riffiness on a few of the longer tracks, but that's about all you get from that sound. There's a lot more acoustics, atmospheric organs, and pianos than there are sludgy, meaty guitars across this thing. But to be fair, it's also not as huge of an offshoot away from their sound as that suggests, considering where stoner rock has its roots. If I do have one gripe, it's that I'm not actually wild about the vocals on this. They feel a bit underweight and dry. Again, probably thanks to both these bands' stoner metal roots, where that vibrancy isn't as much a requirement, but so much of this album is purely instrumental that it's not a huge deal either. And I'm definitely more intrigued by this than I would have been if I had just gotten what I expected out of this album. I gotta admit, I wouldn't have chosen December 10th to release one of the most intricate, interesting, and epic prog metal albums of the year, but to Dessiderium's credit, that means it's plastered all over the front page of every metal site today as the only interesting thing happening. Also to their credit, it's really quite good. Definitely a lot of roots in black metal more than anything, though I hear some melodic death metal around the edges, but more than anything, it's just grand. Big symphonic swells, epic riffs, huge blasts of black metal atmosphere, long tracks, a lot more going on here that I'd be reasonably able to pick out after a single listen, but damned if I ain't feasting while listening to this. I guess maybe it starts to blend together a bit by the end, but the intricacies of an album like this are generally not going to stand out on first listen, and when the entire hour-long ride is a delight front to back, I'm hardly complaining. A late arrival for the year, but one that absolutely deserves your attention. Well, I'll freely admit, folk metalcore is a new one to me. Probably been done before, sure, whatever. I haven't heard it before. Granted, this album is kinda taking bits and pieces from a lot of extreme metal. Metalcore in its style and songwriting, sure, but with the folky acoustics and cleaner moments, the delectable and juicy guitar tone more reminiscent of death metal, and a flair for the atmospheric that feels pulled straight from black metal. It's a delightful mishmash of styles that really elevates the sound over your average metalcore record, and especially of how strong a first impression the first few tracks leave, it certainly caught me off guard. There's some real weight and power to this stuff, man. Maybe it does peter out a little towards the back half, though the epic 7-minute closer rewrited things a bit, and it's not an overly long listen either way, so yeah, seeming like this year is ending on a strong note for metalcore, if this and Silent Planet have anything to say about it. This is one of those black metal albums that's just plainly obviously good, you know? The production is at just the right level of lo-fi to have lots of texture without crushing the melodies. The melodies themselves are a great mix of epic and intense. The mix is balanced with the guitars at the front and the drums never overpowering them. The compositions are long and sprawling with lots of different moods and dynamics, and there's a symphonic undercurrent to the whole thing that makes it sound larger than life. I also don't know yet if it really exceeds that obvious goodness, because the sound itself is really good, but it doesn't really wow me in any way either. There's not really anything about it that's particularly unique, and while the whole thing is enjoyable front to back, there aren't any moments really standing out to me or crushing me under their weight. I don't know, this could end up like Braun in that it's a quietly fantastic album that takes a few listens to grow on me, or it could just be a really solid but unspectacular black metal album. Only time will tell. I'm not quite sure how to feel about this one, actually. The first proper album from this proggy jazz rock group, who previously put out 3 EPs I've either liked or loved, and this, well, I still enjoyed it, but I think the main issue is that it just doesn't feel quite as kinetic or groovy as their other stuff. About half the track list is very languid in nature, and even the other half, while having some of the more exciting sounds I liked in their previous work, doesn't quite land its grooves and melodic hooks as well either. And it's not that I dislike the more slow-paced stuff. They're good moments for catching your breath, but man, do some of them go on. And without the hypnotic grooves that made their previous slower tracks enjoyable, I'm just not sure there's as much to return to here. I'll definitely give it its fair shot. There's still a lot to like here, especially in those more kinetic moments, but I really wanted to like this more too, and that kinda sucks.
My face is the front of shop. My face is the real shop front.
I kinda just missed this when it first released, and then in the wake of Sophie's passing, it sort of felt awkward to try and get into, but it's been on my mind most of the year, and I want to cover more LGBT music on this channel anyways, so screw it. Let's check it out before the year ends. I'll freely admit I don't quite get it yet, but this is a first impression, and this is not a typical sound by any means. The album pretty freely bounces between ethereal ambient pop sounds and harsh, whirring electronics, rather haphazardly at that, almost as if it's at war with itself. While the lyrics to many of these tracks boil down to a repeated mantra or two, with verses occasionally filling in the gaps. Each track more trying to convey an idea than to be conventionally, well, a song, and for the most part I can kinda get into it, though Ponyboy and Whole New World might be pushing it a little for me as far as the harsher aspects of this go. It's something that's gonna take more spins for me, but it's a fascinating listen nonetheless. And that'll do it for this month. Well, mostly. There's actually one more album I heard this month that I ended up wanting to do a full album review style video for, so look out for that sometime in the new year, I guess? Anyways, last episode of the year. We made it. I'll see y'all in the next one.